Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
That's how they do.
All right, so let's go ahead and get this started here. So, it's been about 2 years since your band of intrepid heroes destroyed the necromancer Gendrid.
So why is
Where's my
Khalil
token?
saluting him old?
And in the intervening 2 years, the 8 of you who were there taking down this necromancer remained close. You all had separate business, separate ways to do, but you remained pretty close and in strong contact, even as you pursued each other's own goals. Several of you, those goals included waging war against an Illithid army in the Underdark. And this war took about 2 years to bring to its completion. 5 of you were there when the last Illithid stronghold fell. You led the vanguard of an army made mostly up of gnomes, but also some no small number of human mercenaries and renegade drow. The 5 of you who were there were Captain Terran, Khalil, Eric, Zook, and Daniel, the Dragonborn Paladin. Bringing on this Illithid stronghold, the 5 of you discovered a vast library of text that none of you were able to translate. And so, over the course of many months, you tapped resources, you used whatever contacts you could to bring in some means of deciphering these scripts. And as you put them together, they started to build a map. And the map showed doorways leading from the world of Trennis to many other places in the multiverse. And it listed schematics for how to close and seal these doorways. The methodology for doing this involved horrible, horrible acts of violence. The blood of 10,000 innocents and so on. However, opening these doorways would be not a trivial, but not a morally reprehensible act. So the question that comes to mind then, if I can get my notes open here, is because several of you, actually only 3 at this point, Terran, Zook, and Jade, were not, and Daniel, so 4 of you, were not natives to the world of Trennis. You had come from some other world and had found yourselves trapped here. Your group does have the means of traversing the plains, because Eldov has a magical dancing hut.
Yeah.
Beyond that, though, there is the question of whether or not these portals should be open. And you find yourself in a very strange position of authority. That this decision falls to you and some of your comrades. So you put together a meeting at one of Eldov's mentors, the cloud giant Kefas. He agrees to host this meeting. Kefas himself has a lot of interest in opening certain portals because he believes it can save a race of giants that are turning to stone. So at this meeting are the 8 of you adventurers, Terran, Eldov, Fred, Jade, Zook, Eric, Daniel, and Khalil. Also there are Wilgum the Bald, who was the king of the Deep Gnomes, who led the vanguard against the Illithid armies. Also there is Amshun Udak, who has taken on the role of liaison between, since you linked up your Blue Wormling Inn with his village on the other side of the world. He's been working very closely with you guys and can not only keep your secrets, but has also been able to give counsel on issues like this. Also there are Kefas himself, the Yugoloth, Ashatiru, who has taken control of the Cult of Ith, as promised, and Ferdak, the Githzerai monk, who once spoke of a city of 1,000 doors. And this meeting of the minds is taking place at this keep, and the discussion is supposed to determine what to do with this map of portals that you've uncovered. Ferdak is very brazen about opening as many as possible to facilitate the trade of ideas and goods through what he knows to be the center of the multiverse. Ashitiru is very reserved about it. He likes the idea of using these portals for his purposes, but he doesn't want to lose control of it. He thinks that the people in this meeting have a unique obligation to control what enters and leaves this world. Kifas has personal goals that he's looking for. And this has been a point of contention between him and you guys for the past couple of years, because he knows you have in your possession this magical dancing house. But it doesn't work for his purposes. He needs something that he controls so he can further his research through other planes. Fred has pretty much retired from the adventuring gig at this point. Having his soul disintegrated was kind of a wake-up call to him. And he's like the easy Mac of the group. Every time you go, we should invite Fred around. And then every time he shows up, you're like, why do we keep inviting this guy? He shows up with an...
That doesn't sound right.
He shows up with an entourage of drunken louts that he hangs out with 100% of the time. He's just... He blows all of his wealth.
Hanging out with Eldo's sister.
He doesn't seem like he totally grasps the idea of what this could potentially mean. To him, it's pretty much a game.
So imagine 100 onion.
Oh my god, Terrence, shut up about the goddamn onion.
And that just leaves Daniel, who at this point in time has more or less become a sworn sword to Terran. So the discussion opens with some conflict already in the room. The question is what portals to open, where do they go, how many to open, and whether or not this is a decision that the people in this room should make, or whether it's bigger than you. You have the floor.
I'm going to need a minute to get into an Eric mindset. I'm not a Kelian mindset.
I don't know about everyone else, but I'm finding it very difficult without seeing Mega Man on this table.
I don't even think I have those in the chest anymore, honestly. Let's see.
And maybe we could get a more appropriate tabletop, like for this circular meeting room that we're meeting in.
Oh my god, they went flying everywhere.
Woo! I mean, we got Applejack here. Who was Applejack?
I don't remember. I think Applejack was like dragons and things. Whenever you needed tokens for large monsters, you would blow her up.
Oh, well, Applejack is Kelian now.
That's about right.
Applejack is Kelian. Oh, goodness.
God, you're not fooling, Kelian. This is hard.
Yeah,
and my characters are very similar, and this is hard.
So we can assume, for the sake of argument, that Terran has already given an onion speech.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Coincidentally, an onion broth has been served for the evening meal.
Fred's soul was also destroyed? I thought it was just Daniel and Eric's.
Fred, Daniel, and Eric.
Okay.
And then the surviving members made a pilgrimage to the Temple of Bahamut on Mount Celestia to beseech their return.
That I remember.
The thing is, like, we were concerned about Daniel and Eric. We always knew Fred's soul would be restored, because multiverse wouldn't stand the gap.
I think Jade's bold positions would be that we owe it to the people like us who have been trapped on Trennis for who knows how long to open as many portals as we can.
Ashitiru,
because we have the means to get off. They don't, and that's not fair to them.
And Ashitiru cautions against that line of thinking, saying that we know at least 2 cases where an extremely dangerous individual who posed potential harm to the multiverse at long found themselves trapped here and impotent to power. He's referring to Gendred himself and to the pit fiend Destin Locke.
Yeah, that's true.
Sure, but I mean, look at us. We've gotten off plane, and if we can do it, then other people are going to be able to. It makes more sense to open up the pressure gauge where we can control it, or at least watch over it.
Khalil will agree with Eldav on that.
And Jay points out to Ashatira's point that you're right that this has happened, but surely one way of getting rid of dangerous individuals such as these is to offer them a way out. Otherwise, they're trapped here with the rest of Trinus' population.
Ashitiru asks, what Jade's contingency plan is if Destin Locke were to return through a number of open portals with an army.
Eldav looks around the room and says, "We take him out, same as we've done everyone. That's what we do."
I don't know about you, but I don't plan on fighting for the rest of my life.
Once a portal is open, it stays open, right?
We know use the ritual to close it, but I would prefer you didn't.
Yeah, we know how to close them, and that's not a thing anybody will ever be doing again.
I'm all for opening one portal and seeing how that goes.
So we should take it slow?
I think we should just see what's out there. I mean, we should get a portal that's easy to control, that goes to a place we know to be safe and not have any harm. Open it, see what happens.
That's the thing. We don't know where the hell these places go.
That's actually not true. This map that you have that you've put together kind of tells you where these portals connect to.
Yeah.
So you do know where these go.
Because Eric's thought process was open up a portal, see what happens, and if it's bad, close it again. And then just iterate through all of the portals that we can.
Yeah, I do understand Ashitira's concern, though. I think that some sort of organization ought to be formed to watch over whatever portals are opened.
I think we should at least come up with a way right now, right here, to decide between us how we're going to open these portals so that everyone doesn't become a fight.
At this point, Zook pipes up and says that he wouldn't mind opening up a particular gate that travels back to his homeworld, the place he came from, the forests that he grew up in. He suggests maybe we start there.
So is the planet full of people like you, Zook?
How many primes are on that map?
For purposes of this discussion, just assume that the portals, there are as many portals as you need there to be for an interesting discussion, and they go to whatever places you need them to go.
Looks like there's two that go back to Zook's prime. One is pretty isolated, the other's a lot closer to some big population centers, if I remember my Trinus geography. Probably open the isolated one.
That makes sense.
Seems legit.
Going back to Ashitira's concern, it makes sense to open the isolated ones first so that people are not in immediate danger if something dangerous comes through.
Isolated here in Trinus.
Right.
Fairdak points out, too, that fear of terrible things coming through these doors should not stifle the potential for good things to come through as well. He points to one portal in particular and says if we were to open this one that connects to the City of Doors, the exchange of ideas and beliefs and philosophy would be of uncalculable importance.
I don't know much about that place.
Yeah, I don't know either. We'd have to go in there and find out about it first.
So you're saying if we open up this one over here, then a bunch of educated philosophers will come through?
He thinks for a moment on how to best answer the question, and then the answer he gives is probably not. And he explains that worlds like Trinus are considered kind of a backwater. It would be the equivalent of Well, in your Blue Wormling Keep, if you learned that a village 3,000 miles away that raises sheep has offered to open a trade route to you, would you send an emissary?
She weren't bad.
Khalil chuckles at that.
I'm not going to turn down a leg of lamb.
Well, I
Yeah, I
guess
don't
my
think we've
question,
had enough sheep. Terran keeps
my
eating all of
question
our
for
sheep.
Ferdak would be, if what you're saying is true, why would opening its portal benefit us if they would have no interest in Tyrannus?
He explains that the exchange of ideas goes two ways. He turns to Ashitiru and says that the potential of controlling these portals on Trennis's end is very high. And from that aspect, the best one to open would be the one to this City of Doors.
And I feel like
I'm all
if we're going to
for
open
a
a
little bit
portal,
more culture in this place.
if we're going to
Let's
open a
make
portal, I
that the
think we
first one
could
we do then.
Yeah.
build a outpost around
Build an outpost where?
at wherever the portal opens.
Yeah.
Keep it
And
guarded.
at this point, 'cause since the conversation is going towards opening this portal, Eldov will lean over to Zook and he says, Zook, at any point, you just come to me. I'll bring you to your home world and back and forth as much as you want.
And presumably that's already been happening. But Zook
I know,
at this
but Eldov
point,
just doesn't want Zook to feel like he's being left out.
right. Well, I mean, he is, because his player decided he didn't want to play with us anymore. So, I mean, what can you do, right?
No, Verkroyd, it had to do with babies. I know how you feel about babies.
Only the ugly ones. Anyway. So let's get a general idea from each of the five of you. Discussing opening this one first. And then what's kind of the end game here, assuming that goes well. Philosophically, do the people of this world have, say, like a right to have open doorways to other worlds, or were those doors closed for good reason?
Eldov thinks that there should be someone in charge of making sure that open portals are used responsibly.
Does Eldov think he should be the one in charge?
Not necessarily, but he wants to be part of the group that decides who that person should be.
So then the conversation comes back around to who should be the people in charge. Who gets nominated?
How tied are we with the Cult of Ith at this point?
Let's put it this way.
Uh-huh.
The U.S. teamed up with the USSR to defeat the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened?
Yeah, okay.
So you've still got this incredibly evil cult devoted to this shadow dragon, and it's being led by a Yugoloth, an Arcanoloth, one of the Fox guys, who has delivered on all of his sweet promises up until now, but just the nature of him is he's playing a long game. So
we're pretty fed up.
he's got cards he's not showing, and the Cult of Ith isn't bent on like world domination, but they're certainly up to no good.
Then I would nominate Ferdak in his group.
Who's Ferdak?
Ferdak's the monk. He was at the Flumph temple.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. No, that sounds good to me.
And I look at Ferdak if that's a burden you would be willing to accept.
Ferdak says that members of his monastic order have spread throughout the multiverse, as Jade knows, being from a distant branch of it herself. That he might be able to make contact with other orders of the monastery throughout the prime material plane. That this might be something he could facilitate.
Well, if there are people coming through this gateway from other completely different planes, it wouldn't be a bad place for a secondary monastery here in Trennis. I mean, you'll get a lot of stories out of that.
And he concurs.
Well, now that we've decided who's in charge, what do we do when we decide we need to get rid of him?
When we need to do what?
I'm just saying, I'm not comfortable with putting this guy in charge forever. Like, what is the procedure in place for Ferdak? No offenses to you, I nominated you just now, for when we no longer think he's doing a good job.
And he explains how his monastic order chooses to promote within their own ranks, who takes on the reins of the high monks when the previous ones die or retire. He says it's very much like a spiritual awakening when the high monk retires. And he uses the word retires in place of the word dies. Let's put it that way. That there is like a spiritual meeting of the minds amongst the inner circle of the highest of the order, and the new high monk just emerges. It's not a procedure that ever has any kind of political strife. It's just silently agreed and understood who takes the mantle at any time.
This group should simply have another meeting every 3 years. Ostensibly, I mean, maybe later on, once it's more well established, we can go longer. But just meet back in 3 years, and if we need to, we might decide someone else should be guarding the portal. No offense, Ferdak.
Ferdak's fine with that.
Also, that would give us a time to consider opening others, closing them if necessary. Shutters, so that,
or at least defending the ones that have caused problems. If closing them is untenable.
Closing them is untenable.
Well, I'm not. We might find another way of closing them. Listen, I'm just saying, these illithids, they found the way that worked, but maybe
they actually didn't. It doesn't look like the illithids were the ones who did this. It looks like the knowledge was already ancient, and the illithids came into possession of it.
Sure, but Eldov's thinking to himself that, like, once they found this way, they didn't go looking for another way.
Did the illithids open any of the portals themselves?
They did not.
Okay.
So the idea is to kind of vet out portals that are not near population centers.
Yeah.
Eldov personally thinks we should open up a portal near the Blue Dragon.
Let's open up this one to the City of Doors that Ferdak wants, and then in 3 years, when we meet again, we can decide which other ones to open if that experiment goes well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the idea. Mind link to Eldov. Do you want to throw a teleportation circle down in the once we get this thing set up and have our little base established?
And Eldov will sigh, because that sounds like a huge commitment. But it'll just be like, sure, I mean, once these cultured people come through, it'll probably be fascinating to talk with them every day.
I'll keep you company, don't worry.
So
maybe we can invite them over, have dinner parties, and Eldov is clearly getting more excited.
over the course of the next 3 years then, before the time of this next meeting, how much effort do each of you put into pursuing this goal, considering you also have to balance that with all of the other shit you guys have going?
Well, what's the goal that you're talking about?
Like vetting out more portals to open. Like your adventures out in the multiverse, looking for new places that might be safe or beneficial to connect back to Trennis.
Well, Eric is committed to his temple at the Blue Wormling Inn, whatever we called it. But he is also committed to... He views this as a problem that the group created, and therefore is also responsible for. So he would divide equal time to both.
Okay. So he's more interested in if, say, Eldov comes back and like, dude, I found this awesome portal and I opened it and now like octopus demons are coming through. Eric would be like, okay, let's just go kill the octopus demons and then we'll deal with it. Okay.
That sounds like an actual conversation.
It really does.
The only difference is that it wouldn't be like, okay, it would be like...
Yeah, I was about to say, Eric would be going,
okay.
Like, Eric gets a 4 a.m. text, and it's just Eldov. It just says, okay, don't be mad.
Eldov has invented magical emoticon texting. So it's the picture of Eldov's face with, like, a frown.
So throwing it over to Eldov
is tentacles.
Does Eldov approach this responsibility kind of recklessly? Is he more interested in just finding the weirdest, most powerful places he can?
So I'm not opening the portals, but I'm absolutely looking for the most crazy places.
Okay.
So I'm spending my time half between, like, establishing this teleport circle and talking with the people who come through the portal, and half adventuring around the multiverse. And out of character a little bit, considering the kind of people who are likely to come through this portal, some of them are probably getting invited on crazy multiverse adventures.
That's fine. So, where are a few places Eldov over the years would advocate connecting to.
Oh God.
You gotta have an elemental plane of fire portal in your basement, Eldov.
Well, I mean, the elemental plane of fire.
It's the
portal.
world's greatest garbage chute.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, so how many people have played Planescape Torment? Because right at the very beginning part, that's what I'm thinking is likely to happen. But probably Mount Celestia.
Mount Celestia? Really? Why?
Because it was already useful. We've already been there once.
That's true. Yeah.
Terran is ostensibly a paladin
Okay.
at this point.
And you're forgetting that Eldov, unlike Mahogany, is chaotic good, and at least considers himself someone who would try to better himself. So even if he never leaves the first plane of Mount Celestia, he enjoys going there to try.
And the water there burns him like holy water because he's chaotic.
Yeah. Well, that's just part of it.
So what about Jade? How does she approach this responsibility?
Jade devotes maybe about a month of every year to it, because she figures she's got so much on Trinus to take care of. She's got an adopted daughter. She's got all this, like, she's part of Ferdax group now. She's still a monk. She doesn't spend a lot of time off Trinus the way that she thought that she once would.
Okay.
But she goes every now and then.
So what kind of places would she advocate opening to?
Once she learned of kind of like how the multiverse was structured through emissaries from the City of Doors, who like knew way more about how the multiverse works than anyone on Trinus.
Mm-hmm.
She would be interested in. Well, she'd be interested in visiting Sigil for one thing. Just because that seems like a place where people like her would be at least not looked bizarrely upon, because everyone in Sigil is already so strange. She'd spend time there. She would want to open up another portal to is it Bitopia I'm thinking of, or is it what's the one where you have to do good works to
Elysium.
progress? Elysium, yeah, to Elysium, because she figured nothing dangerous could possibly come out of that one.
Okay. What about Terran? How does he approach this responsibility?
Terran's going to split his time working with Eldov, but the time he's not, keeping Eldov company during the teleportation circle ritual and crazy adventuring, Terran is going to research the far planes and try and not open a portal to the far plane, but try and open a portal to a place that he can then travel from to the far plane, because he's not insane enough to actually connect the far plane to Trinus, but as long as it's a couple of just 2 or 3 transfers.
Now, to be clear, then, there are no portals anywhere ever that go to the far plane. The far plane is unreachable. So Terran is mostly okay. I'm interested in where the portals in this map don't go.
Yep,
that's where I want to go.
Far plane. I don't know this.
The far plane is, I think it's new in 5th edition cosmology.
It was in 3rd edition.
Was it?
When it was introduced, yeah.
It's basically the stuff outside of the multiverse.
Huh.
Essentially.
It's where the Cthulhu gods live, basically, where you get your Cthulhu. And so naturally, as a warlock of the Great Old One, Terran has some interests.
And finally, what about Kelian?
Kelian would probably be advocating the more practical aspects of security, keeping things safe for this initial portal. So he would try to leverage whatever clout he has back in Kiska to supplement that, and that would turn into leverage against him trying to open up new routes of trade. And so probably City of Brass is going to happen at some point.
Yeah. I'm thinking about my answer because I didn't have very much time to think, and I'm almost wondering if Eldov would prefer the Outlands, because they're like the most everything, and that seems like very Eldov, like not really focusing on one thing.
Brick, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Does Cube know or remember that he came from Mechanos?
He has no recollection whatsoever.
He has no recollection? Okay.
Yeah. In game terms, a rogue Modron, for all intents and purposes, is not a Modron.
Okay.
When the Modron goes rogue, like, their brain awakens to a new existence. So,
So
he has
none of us
no
are big
recollection.
fans of Mechanus at this point, right? Because we all know that they fucking hate Q.
Yeah.
And fuck them.
Yeah, good.
At some point in the
Wait,
intervening years,
did we cover what Eric does?
Eric was
Yeah.
he feels responsible for causing
Okay,
this whole
yeah,
thing in the
yeah.
first place, and he was going to focus on protecting
Gotcha.
the cathedral that he's establishing.
This is not to say he would never plane jump, but he's like we talk. Like if he was pressed to do it, he'd be like, "All right, fine." But he's very much. We need to. This is our responsibility, and I have a church that I'm establishing.
Very good. I closed a window that I did not mean to close, so we're going to have an awkward silence for a moment.
You have to unclose it.
I have to I have to re-unclose it. Yes.
You declosify it.
While he
Deep.
figures that out, how much time do you think Terran and Eldav spend going to Bytopia and doing experiments in the exact place where the gravity switches over?
Probably a week or two.
In the dark room, you're sitting there and having a conversation with this man, the Watcher. And he seems to drift in and out of the conversation at times. And it's difficult to get a read on his face because he doesn't have eyes. He has just balls of stone in his eye sockets. But for long periods of time, he'll sit motionless with his elbow on the table and with his hand kind of clasping at nothing in midair in front of his face. And it's unsettling. And once in a while, you have to stop mid-sentence and make sure he's still listening.
By the by, Liberation's taking notes because he's already heard the thing of everybody forgets the Watcher after meeting him. So no, he's trying to get as much down on paper as he can.
And eventually, he interrupts whoever's talking at the time. And he says, more to himself than any of you. He says, I understand now. These are the players.
Wait, what?
Sorry?
He says, forgive me. I have difficulty sometimes separating that which I'm seeing from that which I have seen.
So wait, the players? You talking about Aunt Nancy? Is that what's the thing?
He shakes his head and waves off the question. Says, my apologies. We were discussing Factal Nilesia.
Yeah. So that's one thing I wanted to know. Why is the folk hero for the Mercy Killers sitting in the middle of who knows where the hell we are right now?
Yeah, where are we? Are we still in Sigil?
Yeah.
He says that he prefers you not know the answer to that.
Okay.
Okay.
Kelian rolls his eyes.
Okay, so it's going to be a story to get back. I see.
Well, he didn't say that.
Liberation chuckles.
Yeah,
there
one way.
will be a
Are we-
story.
Are we even able to get back? Why haven't you gone back? I mean, do you know what's happening with the Mercy Killers?
He says that he has seen Factal Nilesia's justice, and that it is extreme in the excess, far and away out of proportion to the crimes that she has committed.
That she is committed?
He nods.
So she's committed crimes then.
I could have told you that. Didn't
He
even watch
says,
it for this.
we have all committed crimes. And
Thank
Nilesia
you.
will pay for hers far out of proportion of that which she has committed. Hers is a justice that would not be acceptable to anybody. And so, I have stayed my hand against her.
Could you, unstay it?
Yeah, people are suffering.
Yeah, Sickle's going to hell in a handbasket.
And he says, if a million Sigillians... That was a weird phrase.
Yeah.
If a million
Does he
citizens...
say that?
No. If a million citizens lost their lives at her hand, her inevitable sentence would still be out of proportion with the crimes.
Her hand or Rowan Darkwood's hand?
He's not sure he follows. He asks what Factal Darkwood has done.
You stole my house.
They're working hand in hand.
He's getting fat off of her misguided, deluded justice crusade. And in return, they look the other way.
Kelian's insinuation is that Darkwood is behind this, then that she doesn't know any better.
He says that Darkwood sits in a blind spot, so he does not concern himself with Darkwood.
Blind spot, huh? Liberation chuckles a little bit at that.
Mahogany looks at you and frowns.
And
It's the elephant in the room, Mahogany. I mean, come on now. Like, how can a man who has no eyes claim he can see everything, including that which can't be seen?
he shakes his head. He says, I cannot see everything. I can only see justice. I see it the way that you see light.
I'm not seeing a lot in this room.
You've come here to ask me to act as judge, but that is not my role.
Can I ask how you came to be here? Is this exile Nilesia's doing or your own?
He says that were it Nilesia's doing, that the penance she will pay is still out of proportion. She could not commit enough atrocities to earn the sentence that she will get. He says nobody in this room could.
At
No-
this point, Mahogany will say, like...
Sorry, go ahead.
Alright, so is this a future thing? Because you keep referencing the future. Like, is this a future sight thing? Magic stuff?
And Kelian will follow up with that. Like, is she going to get mazed? Is that what's going on? Is the lady going to get involved?
He says it must deal with events that have not yet come to pass. Otherwise, you would already know it.
Alright, so it's a future sight thing.
So you said
And
that
this
this is-
Mahogany says to the group as if he's explaining what's going on here.
Hey, I could see the future like before, like it's very recent, very near future, but then that didn't happen. That doesn't happen anymore, and all I see is fire now.
I don't actually believe the future exists.
Yeah, well,
This is a pointless conversation, if that's what it is.
If the future doesn't exist, then how come I was able to see it when I was Guru?
oh my god.
Listen,
There's only now.
he's got his own version of the Onions speech.
But you still haven't answered my question. Like, leaving aside whether or not she's culpable for it, what happened here?
He says that you don't find my answers satisfying. For that, I apologize.
Well, I mean, you're couching your answers in riddles, which is confusing to say the least.
Is the thing, if you were there, are you saying if you went back to Sigil, then she would have to undergo whatever sentence this was? Is that why you're here?
He says he has nothing to do with Nilesia's sentence. It is not his place to overthrow her as factal. And if he did, he would be adding to the wrong side of the scales of justice. That the balance of justice would not be served.
I don't know what we came here for then.
I'm going to She looks more disappointed than the rest of you at the Watcher's answers. And she says, we came here because there were rumors of a virtuous mercy killer who could help take my faction back from the claws of that woman. Such a nasty woman.
Oh my god. It has been 0 minutes.
I couldn't resist. Anyway. And the Watcher asks her whether or not she finds any comfort, then, as a mercy killer herself, in knowing that Nylesia's sentence will be so extreme. And Ione thinks on it for a moment, and says that it's a cold comfort if in the meantime her faction continues to suffer. And she casts kind of a sideways glance at Riot when she says that, in agreement with her.
As far as Riot's concerned, she's not agreeing with her. Like, there's a whole city.
Does Riot say that out
One
loud?
faction. Yeah, sure.
And Ione nods. She says, I do agree. And with a strong mercy killer factal who serves the city and serves the tenets of justice, many of those citizens who now suffer will find respite.
Mahogany will turn towards the Watcher at this point, and he'll say, just so that we can wrap this up, the Mercy Killers aren't fulfilling the purpose they need to in the city anymore, and if they don't, some other faction will. Are you okay with that, or are you going to come with us?
He says that the forces of justice will be served, and that his role is to observe those forces.
I think this guy is full of shit.
Yeah, this is... Yeah, fuck him.
And Kelian sort of says it in his face. Sort of trying to prompt something out of him that this homicidal rogue Aasimar has done terrible things and he hasn't spoken up yet.
Do you voice that concern, or is that just what you're thinking?
No, Kelian will voice that concern.
And the Watcher says that you need not worry, that he has seen the extent of your crimes. He says, I admit some personal pain. The crimes that you have committed against me personally, they ache me more than those against impartial strangers. And they should not. I apologize if I cannot maintain the veneer of balance that our previous factual entrusted me with. And he says that he locks eyes, quote unquote, with Kelian, which is something that hasn't happened since you first entered this room.
Liberation looks at Kelian like, what? What?
It seems to me that the Watcher is a good name for you. You're just sitting here not doing anything.
He says nothing in response to that. Ione is now kind of eyeballing Kelian, though.
So wait, you met this guy before, Kelian?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well,
Do we have two?
I turned to Ione and said, "Didn't you just say that nobody remembers meeting this guy?"
She nods. She looks very confused as well.
Old man, tell me, how do you know Kelian?
This man has committed a crime. And he looks around the room at basically everybody except Liberation. And to some degree or another, these others are complicit in it. When you entered here, it is why I didn't recognize you at first as the players. I will attempt to look past that.
It's an interesting word you've used again.
Yeah, who are the players? Are you a player?
And he shakes his head. And he says, "Would that I were."
Just make yourself one. Do something.
Ione looks at the awkwardness in the room, and then she asks Kelian point blank, "What have you done to wrong this man?" Perhaps if we start there, he'll be more forthcoming.
Hell if I know.
She looks at the rest of you. Any ideas?
I've known Kelian for... How long have we been together?
Half a year.
Half a year? Yeah, 6 months. And I've seen and heard him do some terrible things, but never to this man in particular.
Though, to be fair, he turns to Ione, sort of half joking. Maybe I wouldn't remember what I did if I did it.
Yeah, that's the point that I was getting at.
Yeah.
And if he's not willing to tell us what it is, then it's pointless.
Wait, did he say we were complicit in it?
Everybody but Liberation.
So it's something that happened in those 6 months.
Before Garuk died and I was born.
Well, it's an even smaller part of those 6 months because Ione is part of it.
No, he was not including Ione in that.
Yeah.
Just you guys.
Oh, okay.
Do you know who Nancy is?
And he shakes his head. I've not heard this name.
Then why is he...
But you're calling us the players.
Players.
We are the players
like-
in Aunt Nancy's game.
I mean, Riot's a player.
Sure. I strum out a few bars on the guitar.
He says he was expecting more of you. The players...
Should have brought the signer.
The players that visited previously numbered fewer. Said next
So
time
wait.
there would be more.
Could you describe them?
He shakes his head.
Give a time frame?
How long ago were they here?
He says he's not sure if they've been here or if they haven't arrived yet.
So I guess you wouldn't be able to tell us similarly when we did whatever we did to you. I mean, maybe we were about to do it in 5 minutes.
He says that you have wronged his comrade in arms, and that this is a crime that you haven't acknowledged or atoned for. He says, in fact, you are hiding from it.
Comrade in arms, who?
He says you would not know him by the name he knows him.
Then what name would we know?
He doesn't suspect Liberation would know at all. And in fact, he seems to be regarding Liberation with more unease than everybody else in the room.
If we knew that name, what name would we know him by if we knew it? And then Mahogany takes both hands and goes,
And the Watcher says, a woodchuck wouldn't chuck any wood.
Dingus.
My only question now is how do we get out of here? How do we get back home? We're wasting our time with you.
He asks why the lot of you are confusing the issue with this talk of factual Nilesia, this talk of potential crimes you've committed, when what you really came here to discuss has not yet been touched on. And he seems to have great difficulty asking this question.